industrial action.
Yes, okay.
Navina?
Yeah, just very quickly, the headlines. So for most of our trade unions, we are awaiting the results of the ballot on the offer for the settlement. With the junior doctors, we are learning and understanding the impact from the previous three-day industrial action. We want to take this opportunity to thank all of our colleagues for managing during that time before and afterwards. We have another period of 4-day action coming up during the Easter break. So we are taking the learning from the last time, but also understanding it's different this time. And so all of our services are planning and preparing for how they would manage to cope to run services as best they can. I think the main message is that we continue to work in partnership with everybody concerned to make sure that we can keep running our NHS services as safely as possible. And the main focus for the planning this time is on local planning, because there will be a lot of local variation. And it's really important that we understand that for our services, for how our services support each other, depending on the local arrangements, and also making sure that the communities and local populations understand what's going on over that period of time. David.
So just again to sum up where we are here. So progress has been made with an offer to the Agenda for Change staff, and that's been endorsed by the NHS Staff Council, meaning that industrial action has been paused. Okay? That is not, however, the case with the junior doctors, and I think it's really important that we understand what junior doctors do and what junior doctors are. So junior doctors make up about half of all doctors in the NHS. They are qualified doctors who have anywhere up to 8 years experience working as a hospital doctor, depending on their specialty, or up to 3 years in general practice. So these people who make a material contribution to patient safety on a day-to-day basis. The BMA and government did meet last week, as has been well publicised, but this did not progress to intensive talks to resolve the dispute. So as such, and you will be aware, that on the 24th of March, the BMA announced a 96-hour strike from the 11th to the 15th of April, which is the days immediately following the Easter bank holiday weekend. This industrial action is set to be the biggest and most disruptive strike in NHS history. So during the strike, we will prioritise resources to protect emergency treatments, critical care, maternity, neonatal care and trauma, and that will be our absolute priority. But the scale and length of this industrial action means that we cannot fully mitigate the risk of patient harm. So I would not want colleagues to underestimate the impact that this industrial action will potentially have on our patients. So we have set up the usual machine to ensure that we oversee the preparations for the industrial action. It will mean some probably changes to whether organising services to ensure patient safety, but I don't think we should underestimate the potential impact of the action that week.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Sorry, forgive me. Comments or questions for David on the report, the broader report? Any comments or questions? Well, yeah. Andrew, sorry.
I just wanted to make a point around performance for the elective recovery work. I mean, if you go back to April of last year, we had 1.2 million people waiting 78 weeks or more on our waiting list. We now will have, at the end of this month, about 11,000 people. And I think we should pay tribute, Richard, to the immense effort that our NHS staff have put into reducing waiting times and trust boards in focusing on this, given that this financial year has probably been the worst in terms of disruption. So we've had COVID, we've had the worst winter on record, we've had staffing challenges, we've now got industrial action. So to see this level of progress, I mean, it takes me back to the Tony Blair days, the early reforms in the turn of the century, where we made these kind of changes. They're pretty seismic. So I think we should pay tribute and thank our staff on the front line here. And we've also got the challenge going forward around delivering 65 weeks. Yeah. And we've got some good funding from government to do this. And I'm sure we can make some real progress, because waiting times, along with cancer rates, are probably the two significant things that most people have in terms of concerns around NHS performance. So I think the NHS has done really, really well on this, given all the other issues that it's had to face.
So I'll bring Wally in a moment, but I would just endorse that. I mean, thanks and appreciation to the huge hard work of all the NHS staff actually who've delivered that. Clearly, we don't stop now. We don't stop here. We've got good support from the government, and we've got funding, and we're going to keep on going, and we're going to keep on driving this elective backlog down. But actually, you're quite right, I think, to highlight from that 1.2 million, a few months ago, down to 11,000 at the end of this month. That's a remarkable shortening, I think, of the list at the longer end. But there's more to do. Actually, in general, on the stats you were giving us, David, I think actually what we do see as we sit here today is we see encouraging progress, really encouraging progress, actually. But clearly there's further to go.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
so, David, if I might return you to the strikes, and you talked very well about the focus you're going to have on the upcoming strike. And I was just wondering about the impact on other initiatives, because we're pressing very hard in terms of primary care access, I think Amanda mentioned, pressing very hard on urgent emergency care, the whole range of things we're doing. I mean, there's only so much bandwidth you have, and the system has. Do you want to just say a little bit more about that?
Sure, just to reflect a few things. First of all, I would say our absolute priority always is patient safety. That's what we will put before anything else. In terms of the trade-offs you make, clearly nobody wants to cancel the patient. Nobody wants to cancel an outpatient appointment or an inpatient appointment or an elective procedure. When I used to run a hospital back in the day, the thing I used to hate most was cancelling a patient, and particularly those very rare times when you used to have to cancel a patient on the day of surgery. It used to make me physically ache, all the stuff they'd organised for themselves or their families or their children, let alone the trauma that people would be going through and the anxiety. But nonetheless, it may be that we may have to stand down some elective activity, particularly, I think, during this week of the junior doctor strike. That is inevitable. And so these are difficult trade-offs which we will need to continue to make, and they will have an impact on one set of targets or another. We will determinedly try to catch up, and I think we've done really well so far, actually. But I also wouldn't underestimate the emotional fatigue actually out there with the frontline staff and those managers who are running around organising this stuff. It's really hard yards, and it is not sustainable over time.
Okay. Steve?
Yes, so I'd endorse everything that Amanda, David and Navina have said concerning industrial action. But our message to the public in terms of use of services will be very similar to the message that we have given during all the days of industrial action that we've seen since December, which is to do what we've asked, which is to use services wisely and appropriately. So do for emergencies, for life-threatening emergencies, do still use those emergency services. We are prioritising them, as David has said. But for other non-life-threatening conditions, then 111 online should be the first port of call. Other services, although there will be widespread impact because, of course, junior doctors do work in other parts of the system other than hospitals. Remember, as David has said, that junior doctors are key professional members of teams, and although we will be putting in support to ensure that those services can continue, there will be an impact. So do use services wisely, and we're incredibly grateful because we have seen over the course of the months since December, the public have responded to those messages, and those messages will undoubtedly be going out again in the days up to industrial action.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And if not, okay, thank you very much.